Are eggs good for you or are eggs bad for you? Well, fortunately, I've gathered some information, so I should be able to get you a straight answer. 100 years ago, eggs were good for you. 50 years ago, eggs are bad for you. Last month, eggs are good for you. And the latest news that we have today is that eggs are bad for you. Sorry. So if you just bought a couple of dozen eggs and they're sitting there in the fridge and you're thinking you might have to throw them away now, don't worry. Easter is a short while away. They'll easily keep till Easter, and by then eggs will be good for you again, so no worries. Today we're going to talk about eggs and cholesterol, and you're going to get the big picture so that you can finally make some good, solid decisions for your health. Coming right up. So a lot of people are concerned because there are some studies out there, and the last one is by JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association. So people are wondering. So we have finally, once and for all, we've got the answer for you. Why are we so confused on all these things? How can there be so much conflicting information? So I'll just try to shed a little bit of light on this. And in recent years, in recent decades, there are not just eggs, but there's hundreds of foods that are so confusing because for every research study that says one thing, there's a study that says the exact opposite. So chocolate, is it good? Is it bad? Is it antioxidants? Is it sugar? Is it dark? Is it what? Coffee. One week it's great for you, the next week it's your nemesis. Same thing with butter. So there's virtually no food that they have studied enough that there's a clear verdict on. Okay, someone is always going to disagree on it. So we have to be really careful with research. We have to look at who's paying for the study, how was the study done, and what are the people. Is it possible that people with different opinions can come up with different results? Okay, of course, the answer is yes. So the latest one by JAMA, or published in JAMA, was what they call a cohort, or an observational study. That means they take a bunch of studies and they look at data over time. There's not an actual researcher that interviews and tests and evaluates people. They send out a questionnaire and then they gather all these information, all this data, and then they look at it. And there is a lot of variety of conclusions. There's a lot of opportunity for drawing conclusions for or against, depending on how you look at this. So in this particular case, they did one questionnaire, and then they followed up 17 years later. So people reported how many eggs they ate, and then 17 years later, they assumed that people were still eating the same thing. Do you think it's possible that they might have changed a thing or two during that time period? Then let's look at another thing. How do you know that of all the variables, of all the things that were going on in these people's lives, that it was the egg that was the key factor? When was the last time you went to have breakfast somewhere and you ordered eggs and you got in a plate with just eggs on it? You would ask, what else comes with this, right? So last time I checked, they asked, do you want bacon? Do you want sausage? And they didn't ask if I wanted nitrates or chemicals with that, which we all know goes with the sausage and the bacon if you eat it out, if you don't get a high quality version. They also asked, there is toast with this eggs, and there is spread. In other words, margarine. Then they give you a lot of jam or honey. If it's jam, it's full of high fructose corn syrup. And then you get some coffee on the side with pesticides and orange juice that has been pasteurized and God knows where it's been. So there's all these different things that are potentially 100 times worse than the eggs, and yet the eggs are singled out because that's what they were interested in this study. But do you think over 17 years that there could be some variation and people maybe eat some other things and change their diet up a little bit, and there could be some other things that have an influence on health. Maybe even such things as smoking, drinking, whether they exercise or not, or if they have a high-stress job. We know that there are 1,000 different factors that influence health, and unless you can do a study where you isolate one variable, you have absolutely nothing to go on. The other problem is not just with the study, but the way we think about things. So we've had this idea about cholesterol for the longest time, and we think of it as bad. By the way, the food labels, the so-called nutrition labels, have you ever thought about that? They list from the top to the bottom the worst things. So they list, at the very top, they list calories, and then they list fat and saturated fat, and then they list cholesterol and sodium. Because those are in our minds, we've been trained to think of those as bad, and it's part of our consciousness. So cholesterol is one of those things that we think of universally as a problem, as a bad thing. But let's look at it. Is that really what it is? So we eat on average maybe 300 milligrams of cholesterol in our diet. But the body manufactures a whole lot more than that because we don't eat enough. So the liver has to make it. Okay? It goes through a 37-step process. Very, very complicated. It's not like the liver just snaps its virtual fingers and have cholesterol. There's a lot of work in making cholesterol. So if we eat a little bit and that was too much, then why would the body make more? Okay? The body is not stupid. The body is not random. The body is not accidental. Everything that happened, every one of these little billions of processes are on purpose. We have infinite intelligence managing this thing. Then on top of that, cholesterol is so precious that it's part of the bile. So the liver has it as part of the bile, and it helps you digest fats, and then it gets out in the bowel, so along with stuff that you're supposed to eliminate. But cholesterol is so precious that the small intestine reabsorbs 50% of the cholesterol that was eliminated, so you don't have to go through all that process of making more. This is a precious substance. So what is it used for? The brain is 70% fat, and 25% of that is cholesterol. Cholesterol is crucial for the functioning of the brain, for the ability to rebuild the brain and maintain certain cell membranes so that you can send signals and determine the regulation, the inside and outside of cells, whatever goes in. Everything in your body depends on cell membranes, and cholesterol is a huge portion of that. It's also a precursor for hormones, and anytime that you make repairs of a cell membrane, cholesterol is involved. So it's not a random, it's not an evil, it's not an accidental substance. The body makes most of it. The more you eat, the less the body has to make. The less you eat, the more the body has to make. If you make none of it, then the body makes more. Did you know that vegans can have high cholesterol? They eat zero and they can get high cholesterol. So this idea that dietary cholesterol results in high blood cholesterol is absolute nonsense. It has no impact whatsoever on blood cholesterol. So why does the body make cholesterol? Does it make good or bad cholesterol? No, it makes appropriate cholesterol. It makes exactly the type of cholesterol that is appropriate for the situation of the physiology of the body in that moment. And it changes minute to minute, so it's appropriate. It's not good or bad. It makes the right kind for what it needs to do. So what they found was, back in some studies in the 50s, 60s, 70s, when they started this association of cholesterol and heart disease, they found that some people with increased LDL had also increased cardiovascular disease. So they concluded that the cholesterol was the cause of the cardiovascular disease. But there is no causative relationship ever established. It's an association, it's a correlation, it's an observation. This is high and this is high. We don't know why. But one was magically proclaimed to be the cause of the other, and since that day we have been afraid of cholesterol, even though it's this nutrient that we have to have. So one of my favorite illustrations, see how ridiculous this notion is of correlation of LDL causing cardiovascular disease, is traffic. If you're driving down the interstate and all of a sudden it comes to a grinding halt and you've got a traffic jam for the next 10 miles, you're assuming traffic accident. And then you're sitting in that line and it moses along, it inches along, and 30 minutes later you get to the accident site, and what do you see? Every time, blue blinking lights. So I draw the conclusion there that blue blinking lights cause traffic accidents, because I've never seen one without blue blinking lights. It's always there. And almost as often, there's those other evil people, the ambulance and the fire trucks. If it's a really bad accident, we'll have all three of them. So it must take three of them to cause really bad accidents, right? So we see how ridiculous that is, because we understand that the cops and the ambulance and the fire trucks show up after the accident. And so it is with cholesterol. Cholesterol doesn't cause it, it shows up after. And it just wants to repair the damage. That's what cholesterol does. It's like putty. It's part of every cell membrane, so if we have damage to those cell membranes, we need more cholesterol to kind of putty up and smooth it out. The true cause of high cholesterol is inflammation. Inflammation does damage. Damage needs to be repaired. So anytime we have inflammation and damage, the body upregulates the LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, so that we can deliver, because that's what LDL does. It's a transport vehicle to deliver cholesterol to the site of repair. So the more inflammation we have, the more repair we have, the more the body will upregulate cholesterol, and it will make the exact right type of cholesterol and the amount that we need to deal with the situation. So we can't blame cholesterol for heart disease any more than we can blame the ambulance for the traffic accident. We get things backwards because we don't understand the big picture. We don't look at physiology. We think very, very primitive in certain ways. So the problem is, in some ways, humans are too simplistic. And on the other hand, we are too complicated in our thinking. So we're too simplistic in the way that we think, oh, I eat this saturated fat, it ends up as saturated fat. It doesn't work like that. Your body is not the food that you eat. Because if all that was, if there wasn't required any steps in between, and you cut yourself, then you say, oh, I've got this cut. I need to provide something to heal it. Let me rub some avocado on it. Let me slap a piece of lettuce on it. Let me rub in some sausage. But it's not the way it works. It has to go through a process of digestion with enzymes. It has to be transformed. It has to be broken down into small components and transformed from one type of component to another. And what creates inflammation is sugar and grains. What creates high lipids, triglycerides, is sugar. And anyone who knows this, anyone who's tried the keto diet or a very low-carb diet knows this. If you have high triglycerides, you cut out the carbs, your triglycerides drop. We have to think differently, okay? The body transforms things. It's not the cholesterol that we eat that becomes the cholesterol in the body. There's a reason for everything that it does. It's not the fat that we eat. We see fat on the body, so we think, oh, I can't eat fat. but the fat on the body is a result of insulin, which is triggered from sugar and carbohydrate. So in that sense, we are too simplistic in our thinking. On the other hand, we're too complicated, because that's why we have pluses and minuses. That's why every research article out there has another one saying the opposite. Because if you give some smart people, some analytical people enough data, they will find a pattern, they will draw a conclusion. And depending on their opinion and their goal and who paid for the study, you have two groups of people that draw the opposite conclusions from the same data. So we can't just look at research. I'm not opposed to research. I think it's great that we learn things, but we have to look at the big picture. We have to look beyond the details, because the more we get lost in the details, the more confused we get. And that's why nobody knows up from down anymore when it comes to food. So we have to ask different questions. We have to look at the big picture, the principles. How does this stuff work in the body? We have to look at the physiology. What happens with the hormones? What happens with the digestion? How do we build tissue? How do we repair tissue? And we have to look at history. What has worked for humans for the longest time? So birds make eggs. They've been around for hundreds of millions of years. Humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and we have eaten eggs wherever they came along. So that is not a new food. It is not something that happened last week, that there's going to be another study to change anything. It's been around for long, it's part of nature, it's good for you, don't worry about it. Okay, what you should worry about are modern abominations like artificial sweeteners, Splenda and aspartame and margarine and canola oil and all these different things that we make that are man-made. Things that were made by nature, they have stood the test of time. All right? Humans know how to select foods in nature. We have for thousands of years, so don't worry about it. Eggs are good for you. That's the official statement of the day. Don't have to wait till tomorrow. If you like to have some today, go for it. And the other thing I do want to add that's super important is, just like there is different quality of margarine versus butter. They kind of look similar, but they're totally different. There's a difference between farm-raised fish and wild fish. There's a difference between corn-fed, hormone-laden beef and grass-fed beef. So there's also a difference between the eggs from chickens, because if you cram 14 of them into a square yard and you feed them pellets and hormones, the resulting egg is not going to be as good as if this chicken or hen was roaming around, picking the bugs and the seeds and the grass and getting some sunshine and fresh air and moving around the way that nature have done it for hundreds of thousands of years. That is the way nature produces healthy food. When we change it, we change everything about that food. When you change the health of the chicken, you change the health of the egg. So pay a little extra for those pasture-raised eggs. If you have someone local that can get you some eggs, even better. So please leave your comments. Let me know if you have any more questions. Let me know if you have some favorite egg recipes. So please share this content with as many people as you can, because we do need to get some good, solid, big picture understanding out there. We can't just get lost in the details and the list of the day. We have to start understanding things so that we can fight against the fads and the trends and get truly healthy for the long term. Thanks for watching.